Aloha, this is Dr. Steve, and this is Chapter 5 on web design in the Web Development Design Foundations with HTML5 text. There will be only one lecture for this chapter. It might be a little long, so hold on, guys. Here we go. There are, of course, several learning objectives for this chapter, including describing the common types of web organization, describing principles of web design, designing for the target audience, creating clear, easy-to-use navigation, improving readability, using graphics, applying concepts of universal design to web pages, describing web page design techniques, and applying best practices of web design. And we'll have an exercise on that later on. So, okay, let's begin here. So the overall design is related to the site purpose. Okay, you have to consider who the target audience is and what it is you want to accomplish. You can see here the kayakdoorcounty.net site looks very different from this web design and instructional technology resources page, right? The one we have for our textbook. Very different purposes, very different audiences. You need to be thinking about this when you design your web page. There are three basic types of website organization. We have hierarchical, linear, and random. Hierarchical, there are a couple different styles of that. A hierarchical organization is one it's really very clearly defined, and this is the one you're going to be using primarily. You have navigation links to all the major site sections, and this is used for commercial and corporate websites. And you can see from the graphic here, you have a home page, and then maybe several links in there, and then from each of those links, other links that goes further down. Now you could have a rather shallow website in the sense that everything is kind of broad. First, the home page has several links, and then there are a few links from there. And that's just a difference in how the information architect has designed all this, and how it's all chunked up. Besides that, you could have a deeper type of organization chart. It's still hierarchical, but it's really deep. Probably you're going to have something in between. You should be aware, of course, of what's called the 3-click rule. You don't want your user to click more than 3 times to get to the information they need. If they have to click more than 3 times, they're probably going to click somewhere else. Then you have linear organization. This is a real simple organization. It's kind of a tutorial or tour. There's not many choices. It's just one link to another link to another link to another link. Good for tutorials, tours, sequential viewing. And then you have kind of a random organization. Sometimes it's called a web organization. I'm not sure why. There's no clear path or anything. Maybe artistic. Let's get to that later on, maybe in another class. For our purposes, we're going to use a hierarchical or modified hierarchical design. Okay, let's look at some design principles here. We have repetition, contrast, proximity, and alignment. Repetition, repeat visual elements throughout a design. So you might do this by having items in the same place. For example, navigation. You're going to have the navigation kind of look the same, and it's the same colors, and it's going to be always in the same place. Maybe you have a logo, maybe you have certain colors. You do this so that all the pages of the site will hang together, and the user will know that he or she is still on the same site. Contrast. Now, contrast you use to kind of bring elements out and use it for excitement. Now, you don't need everything to be exciting, obviously, but some things should be a little exciting, and you use that through contrast. Proximity just deals with you want to group things together. So all the links for the navigation are all kept together, right? Information in the footer is all kept together. So always group things that are related. Alignment, having nice, clear horizontal and vertical alignment makes it easier on the eyes. You want it to be easy to read. You don't have a lot of time to keep your user's attention, so I would encourage you to make it easy to read. Accessibility. Here's a little quote here. The power of the web is in its universality. Access by everyone, regardless of disability, is an essential aspect. This is by Tim Berners-Lee, kind of the godfather of the web. Who benefits? Everybody, of course. Really, a person with a physical disability, of course. Anybody who has a slow internet connection, and we all have those at times. A person using an old, outdated computer, yes, they might have money still, and they can spend that money on your company's website. And a person using a mobile phone, if you're using a 4G phone or even slower, it takes a while to download stuff. And of course, it's the law. You can read about it in Section 508 of the Penal Code. So, if for no other reason, do it for that. Here are a couple of links here regarding web content accessibility guidelines that talk about, again, this is kind of a quick reference and deal with the law. This whole thing is based on like 4 basic principles. It's called the POUR principles, P-O-U-R, perceivable. Content must be perceivable. You got to be able to get it, see it, hear it, whatever, regardless of your ability. Things must be operable. That is, the interface components in the content must be operable. So again, regardless of your ability, you need to be able to operate it. It needs to be understandable. Content controls must be understandable. It can't be in something that's just, it's all hidden and nobody understands it. And it needs to be robust. I love this term, robust. Content should be robust enough to work with current and future user agents, browsers, including assistive technologies. Okay, so it's kind of planning for the future. Okay, writing for the web. This is important. Avoid long blocks of text. Use bullet points, use headings and subheadings, use short paragraphs. You have less than a minute to keep your user's attention. You don't want to waste that on long blocks of text. Common fonts, I would use a sans serif font that is one without all the little curly cues. It looks a little bit better on a computer. Appropriate text size, a medium 1M 100% or larger. Use strong contrast between text and background. Use columns instead of wide areas of horizontal text. Highly encourage you to use columns. Some more considerations. Carefully choose text in hyperlinks. Don't use the words click here. Just use a key phrase or something. And of course, check your spelling. There's no reason for misspelled words. A little bit more about color theory. There's some more information in your textbook and off of the publisher's website. I talk about primary colors, secondary colors, tertiary colors. Please use those materials in the textbook and on the site, and the links that are on the site for assistance. Any of this stuff here from Eric Myers is extremely useful. I encourage you to use his resources. He's excellent in web design and development. A lot of color schemes are based on the color wheel, as it were. You can have different approaches to this. I'm colorblind. It doesn't help me a whole lot, but I'm sure it will help you. And then, of course, you have to implement the color scheme. You implement the color scheme via the different parts of your web page, things like the headings, the subheadings, the borders, the list markers, and so on. Okay? You don't have to restrict yourself to web-safe colors, but it's good to mostly have web-safe colors. You can verify that your site has sufficient contrast by going to these websites. The contrast checker, the color contrast, and the luminosity contrast checkers. Again, I need to be able to see this, so use these. And if you want to make sure that I can see them, show them to me. Send me an email with the link, and I'll take a look at it. More color scheme resources. You can pause and put that code in these sites. Okay, let's look at color and target audience. Here's some 4 examples. Look at this upper left corner one. You see it. This is rather nice, big text, lots of color. Yeah, this is good for kids and maybe preteens. Bottom left looks dark, lots of black. Okay, so yeah, if you're into goth, okay, great, you use that. Not everybody's into goth, but if you want that as your appeal, then that would be a good color scheme. Upper right corner, that's kind of nice. It's appealing to kind of everyone. Text is not too big, not too small, not too many things going on. Lower right, this says appealing to older adults. That's a little bit busy, to be quite honest. I would make it a little less busy. In some ways, the kids and the older adults are rather similar. You want big buttons, you want simple text. The words can be a little bit different, but nice, big, bold text. Nice colors, always useful. Okay, you should be able to list those 4 principles. Remember, pour. You can look at some examples here from these links here. I'm going to give you an assignment later on where you'll have to do exactly the same thing. In any case, you needed to consider the target audience, look at how these designs differ, think about whether or not the site meets the the needs of their target audience. Okay, let's go on. Use of graphics and multimedia. Things you need to consider: file size, dimensions matter. You have to provide for a robust navigation, one that's easily modified, hopefully. Use anti-alias text, provide alternative text using only necessary multimedia. I may ask you I will insist you show me you can use multimedia in our assignments, but in reality you should only use it if necessary. Things to be considered, to be aware of, in your home page especially, you should not, that first page should not be over 60K. And that's just because you don't know where the user's coming from. You don't want them to have to wait a long time for that first page to load up. First page, make it kind of simple, load easily. Use the alt attribute. Use images to convey your messages along with text. Only use animation if it really adds something, not for the whiz-bang feature. Graphic design best practices: use anti-alias text and images. Here's an example of an anti-alias text and an alias text. You see the alias text has a lot of jaggies. We don't like jaggies. Use only necessary images. Reuse images. I mentioned before in other lectures, reusing images is like, free bandwidth. You've already cached it. Doesn't cost anything to use them again. You want things to load fast. That's the main thing. Nobody likes waiting for websites. No one wants to wait for your website either. Okay, load time. Recommendation is watch the time of your pages. Try to limit these things, especially that home page, to about 60K. Later on, it could be a little bit bigger. Let the user make the decision whether or not he or she wants to wait for that large image. Create a thumbnail. Let them click on the thumbnail. Test your website with different browsers. Try IE, Chrome, Firefox, Safari. Try different screen resolutions. I'll show you how to do that in a second. Your design should look good at various screen resolutions. I recommend centering page content, either using fixed or percentage. I would recommend percentage, but if you're stuck on fixed, so be it. Navigation design, make sure the site is easy to navigate. Must have navigation. Don't have dead ends. Provide clear, labeled navigation in the same location on each page. Commonly you have it on the top or the down or on the left side. You could also have it on the bottom. It could be just a navigation bar, simple thing like this image, like this graphic on this slide is, or you could have breadcrumb navigation, dynamic navigation. You can create a site map. You could use a site search feature, or even a skip to content hyperlink on the first page if the first page is extra long. Wireframes, highly recommend you design a wireframe before you spend much time doing the content for your site. This is the graphic here in this slide shows you what a wireframe is. It's not the real content itself, it's just kind of placeholders, and it shows you how the thing would kind of look. Here you have a header and a horizontal navigation and 3 columns, the center column being the wider of the 3, and then a footer at the bottom. This is a common design. Not my first choice, but this is nice. I can live with this. Now let's look at some other things. Concept of placing important information above the fold. This is a concept from the newspaper industry. Where, you know, look at an old newspaper, right? It's always folded in half. It's a portrait and it's folded in half. Those things that are above the fold is what catch the user's attention. And this is true not only for people reading newspapers or people who look on the web. If they have to scroll down, they might not see the information. Not everybody scrolls. It's why people who pay or try really hard to be at the top of the list in Google, because not everybody scrolls down the Google list. They select those items that are near the top. That's above the fold before the scrolling. You should do an interesting page layout. White space is okay. You can have white space. The example down here is, you know, you're missing usable space here. This is not a good use. Let's look at a better example. This is better. Here you have the same information. It's spread out better. 3 columns, a lot easier to read. It's not one column. Again, I'm okay with this layout. There are a couple of other layouts. The one on the right has it's still 3 column in a way. This is really good for a computer, a nice big, 23-inch display. You have a header on the top, you have a navigation on the left, and then your main content is in the right part there, and you have one column that's a little bit bigger than the other. This is really good. I like this a lot. Then the footer that goes the entire width of the page at the bottom. This is nice, and this also will resize nicely when we get into writing for different devices, so that it looks good on a tablet and also looks good on a cell phone, that kind of thing. We'll get into that shortly. So we have what's called fixed layout, which creates this kind of ugly look on the top graphic. It's called an ice design. I'm not a real favor of this. And then you have what's called more liquid design. If you're going to use ice design, at least have it centered, like in the bottom graphic here. At least do that. Remember that wrapper thing we were talking about in the last lecture. Better, you have a liquid design. Liquid design will stretch to whatever size display the user has. And again, I recommend something that's kind of centered. We do that, margin left, margin right, and width 80% kind of thing. Designing for the web. The web, typically you only have 1 column. You don't have 3 columns. Typically, the general rule is that you have a wide display, you have 3 columns, you have a tablet, you have 2 columns, you have a mobile phone, you have 1 column. So you go 3, 2, 1. 3 different approaches to this. You can have your own Mobi site. We're not going to do that. You can host a mobile site within your current domain. We will do that towards the end of the semester. And then we will do, coming up, configure your current website for a mobile display using a responsive web design. That's the main thing we're going to do. I think this is the best way of doing this. So you design it with several different cascading style sheets that will only be used depending upon the width or the resolution, rather, of the device that's accessing the site. So, some simple checklists. Remember, you have a small screen size, you have a small bandwidth, you have only a single column, you want to maximize contrast, you got to optimize those images, describe alternative text for images, and avoid display of non-essential content. Avoid the display, and I'm going to show you how to do that in subsequent lectures. Responsive web design, this is just the beginning part here. Again, this allows you to go from a widescreen to a tablet to a phone. Same content, same web page. It just changes what is displayed based on the resolution of the device that's accessing the website. Very cool. Lots of fun to use. There's a design best practices checklist that's in the textbook. and it's also off the website, and we're going to take a look at it here in this lecture. 8 main categories: page layout, browser compatibility, navigation, color and graphics, multimedia, content presentation, functionality, and accessibility. Okay, here's something you can do if you want as a checkpoint. You can go to our website, the school's website, and apply those best practices to the website. I'm going to give you another assignment shortly, so you'll have an opportunity to use that best practices checklist. In any case, you can try your own favorite website, and again, apply the best practices. Now here, I mentioned before that you can adjust your screen resolution. Here's how you can do that. You can go to that if you're in a Windows machine. You go to Start, Control Panel, Display Settings, and just you can change the resolution. And you can always change it back. But change it just to see how things would look in different resolutions. Okay, there's that checklist again. Page layout. I'm going to quickly go through these. You can read them again in your textbook and off the link in the publisher's website. You want to make sure in page layout that it's appealing to the target audience, consistent header, logo, consistent navigation, formative pages, page footers, etc. You got to look at browser compatibility, displays on current versions of Microsoft Edge, Firefox, Chrome, Safari, Internet Explorer, and on other devices. Navigation should be easy to use for the target audience, structured and unordered list. I'll show you how to do that. Everything has to work. Don't go to a dead end. Everything has to work. Multimedia, use it when it's appropriate. Don't use it if you don't need it. Check download times. Content presentation, web fonts should be nice. Make sure the content's meaningful. Information is easy to find, that is minimal clicks. 3-click rule. Again, functionality, everything has to work. If you have JavaScript, everything has to work. Accessibility, you have to have alt text in there. You need to make sure everything follows ADA compliance. There's another kind of summary here. Image elements, graphics. Use the ID and header attributes. We'll go over that. We'll only use frames, once. We're not going to use frames. And that's about it. Okay, so this kind of introduces you to the concept of best practices of web design. You want to use these ideas throughout every project in this class and everything you do, really, on web development. And that's about it. Thank you very much. Aloha.